The Dreamscape Exodus, Book 1. Written and narrated by Tallulah Crawford. Copyright Melanin Menagerie 2026. Now sit back, get comfortable, and let me tell you a story. Chapter 4. The Quiet Revolution. May 2025, 6 months post-election. Keisha hadn't touched alcohol in 4 months. It wasn't a dramatic decision. No rock-bottom moment, no intervention, no tearful pledge to get sober. She just stopped. Stopped going to happy hours where she was the only black face and had to smile through microaggressions while drinking overpriced wine. Stopped using alcohol to numb the daily exhaustion of existing in a country that saw her as a problem to solve rather than a person to value. She'd stopped, and she'd noticed she wasn't alone. Her cousin Tasha had stopped too, and her brother DeAndre, and her coworker Jennifer, and half the people in her group chat. The black-owned bars in Northeast that used to pack out every Friday with people drinking away their troubles, now it was called Sankofa Lounge and Wellness Center, still packed on weekends, but with people drinking smoothies and kombucha instead of Hennessy and Patron. The shift was everywhere once you started looking for it. Keisha sat in that same space now, transformed by a dim bar with sticky floors to a bright, clean community center with plants everywhere and the smell of sage in the air. She sipped a ginger turmeric smoothie that cost half what a cocktail used to cost and tasted better. Around her, black folks gathered in groups, talking, laughing, planning. No one was drunk. No one was loud in that sloppy way that alcohol made people loud. The energy was different, clear, focused, intentional. Oh, there was joy here, real joy, not the performative kind that came from trying to convince yourself you were having fun while slowly poisoning yourself. Y'all see the news about the federal jobs? Her friend Monica said, scrolling through her phone. They were seated at a communal table. Another change. No more individual tables forcing people into isolated groups. Everything here was designed for community. Which news? Someone asked. They're basically begging people to come back now, offering sign-in bonuses of up to $50,000 for some positions. $50,000. And, Keisha prompted, though she already knew the answer. And crickets! Monica laughed, the sound bright and free. They can't figure out where everybody went. They keep asking, how are they surviving without government jobs? Like we're some kind of charity case that can't figure out how to make our own money. Right? Tasha said, leaning back in her chair. She looked good, had lost weight, her skin was glowing, her locks were fresh. Sobriety looked good on all of them. Like we're too stupid to just choose to not work for people who don't respect us. Speaking of which, DeAndre said, pulling out his tablet, y'all want to see how we're actually doing it? I've been documenting the strategies. It's fascinating. The group leaned in as DeAndre pulled up charts and graphs he had been compiling. He'd always been good with data, had worked as an analyst before quitting his corporate job 3 months ago to consult independently. Okay, so traditional economics says we should be struggling, right? We left stable jobs, we're boycotting major retailers, we pulled our money from big banks. By all traditional measures, we should be in crisis. But we're not, Monica said. But we're not, DeAndre agreed. Because we're doing something different. Look at this. He showed them the breakdown. Income diversification. Average Black American pre-Exodus. 1.2 income sources. Average Black American post-Exodus, 3.7 income sources. We stopped relying on one employer, he explained, and said we're doing multiple things. Gig work, freelancing, small businesses, side hustles. It's more stable than it sounds because if one income source dries up, you still have the others. He pulled up an example. My boy Marcus, y'all know Marcus? He used to work at the State Department making $85,000 a year. Good salary, but he was miserable. They laid him off during the purge. Now look what he does. The breakdown appeared on his screen. Freelance grant writing, 15 hours a week, $35K a year. Online teaching African history courses for 10 hours a week. He makes $20K a year. He owns 3 rental properties in a black housing cooperative, $30K a year. Consulting for black-owned nonprofits, 10 hours a week, $25K a year. Total, $110,000 a year, 45 hours per week instead of 60, complete schedule control. He makes more money, works less hours, and controls his entire life now, DeAndre said. And he's not unique. That's the pattern I'm seeing everywhere. He showed more examples. Keisha's neighbor, a former nurse. She left a hospital job making $72,000, terrible hours, toxic environments. She now does private nursing for elderly black clients for 20 hours a week, bringing her $45,000 a year. She teaches CPR classes for $8,000 a year, makes and sells natural health products for $15,000 a year, and owns stake in community health clinics, bringing her $12,000 a year. That brings her total to $80K a year, better hours, and much happier. Look at Monica's cousin, a former teacher. She left public school making $48K for 60 plus hours a week with no respect. She now runs a learning pod for 6 black families, bringing in $40K a year, tutors privately at $15K a year, and creates educational content online for $18K a year. Her total is $73K for 35-hour weeks actually teaching. She doubled her salary, basically. But it's not just about individual income, DeAndre continued. It's about collective economics. Check this out. He pulled up another chart showing the cooperative economy. Child care cooperatives, 8 families, each takes 1 day per week watching all the kids, saves each family $1,400 a month or nearly $17,000 a year. Total community savings over $130,000 a year. Look at the housing cooperatives. Groups of 4 to 10 families are buying multi-unit properties together. Individual housing costs drop by 40 to 60%, and it builds collective equity and wealth. The food cooperatives, community gardens plus bulk buying clubs, reduces food costs by 30 to 50%, resulting in healthier foods and local sources. The skills trading networks, mechanics, accountants, lawyers, doctors, teachers, trading services. No money exchange equals no taxable income. Everyone gets what they need. Add it all up, DeAndre said, pulling up a final chart, and black Americans are actually wealthier now than before the Exodus. Not in terms of individual salaries, but in terms of real wealth. Less debt, more savings, lower expenses, more assets, better quality of life. And the IRS can't touch most of it, Monica added with a grin. Can't tax a barter, can't tax community gardening, can't tax child care co-ops. They're losing revenue and can't figure out why. An older man at the next table, Brother Malcolm, everyone called him, a retired postal worker who'd become a community elder, leaned over. He'd been listening, and no one minded. This was communal space, communal knowledge. That's that old school economics, he said, his voice carrying the weight of lived history. That's how we survived Jim Crow. That's how we built Black Wall Street. We used to know how to do this. Pool our resources, take care of our own, create parallel systems. But integration made us forget, made us think we had to make it in their economy, play by their rules. He smiled, his face creasing with satisfaction. Y'all remembering, coming back to what worked, and it's beautiful to see. What about the people who can't opt out completely, Keisha asked. The ones still working corporate jobs, still in the system. They're doing that too, just differently, DeAndre said. He pulled up more data. Quiet boundaries, not quiet quitting. Doing exactly what's in the job description, nothing more. No volunteer committees, no extra projects, no going above and beyond, no training replacements who will be promoted over them, no free emotional labor explaining racism, using all vacation days, all sick days, every benefit earned, and looking for exit strategies while employed. Oh, they're still working, but they're working strategically, he explained. They're conserving energy, saving money, building side income, preparing for the day they can leave entirely. My sister's doing that, Tasha said. Still working at her law firm, but she stopped doing all that extra stuff that never got her promoted anyway. Now she works exactly 40 hours, uses every benefit, and spends her free time building her own practice on the side. She'll leave when she's ready, on her terms. That's the key, Brother Malcolm said. On our terms. For once, we're making moves on our terms instead of reacting to their violence. The conversation flowed around the table, people sharing stories of transformation. The software engineer who left Google to work for a Black-owned tech startup at lower pay but better quality of life. The doctor who left a prestigious hospital to open a clinic in a Black neighborhood, using a sliding scale and accepting community service as payment. The teacher who started a homeschool collective teaching Black children their real history instead of whitewashed curriculum. Every story was different, yet every story was the same. People choosing themselves, choosing their communities, choosing to stop begging for scraps and start building their own table. Keisha felt it in her chest, that warmth, that power, that sense of being part of something bigger than herself. This was what the ancestors had meant. This was the quiet revolution. Later that evening, Keisha walked home through her neighborhood as the sun set, painting the sky in purples and golds. The streets were different than they'd been 6 months ago. Cleaner, safer, more alive. The corner store that used to be run down and selling mostly liquor and lottery tickets was now the Ancestors Market. Black-owned, fresh produce section, community bulletin board covered in flyers for Black events, services, businesses. She stopped in to grab some things, chatting with Mr. Johnson, who owned it. "How's business?" she asked. "Better than ever," he said, bagging her items. "People keeping their money in the community now. I used to compete with the big chains and barely made it. Now," he smiled, "now people choose to shop here even though my prices are a little higher because they want to support Black businesses. Community over convenience." Keisha continued walking. The empty lot where people used to dump trash was now a thriving community garden. She could see Brother Malcolm and a group of others tending it in the fading light. Tomatoes, collard greens, sweet potatoes, okra, all growing strong. A sign read, "Take what you need, give what you can." The old factory building that had sat abandoned was now a hive of activity. It had been converted into cooperative business space. Black entrepreneurs sharing rent, resources, equipment. A bakery, a print shop, a recording studio, an art gallery, a coffee roaster, all under one roof. She could hear music drifting from the recording studio, someone laying down tracks. Her apartment building looked better too. The residents had formed a cooperative, buying it from the absentee landlord who'd let it deteriorate. Now they owned it collectively, made decisions together, maintained it themselves. Her rent had dropped by $400 a month, and the building looked better than it had in years. She climbed the stairs to her apartment, noticing the new murals on the walls, painted by a local Black artist, depicting ancestors, African kingdoms, Black excellence through the ages. The hallway smelled like sage and good cooking instead of the mysterious funk that used to linger. Inside her apartment, Keisha made herself dinner with ingredients from the Black Farmers Co-op. Nothing fancy, rice, beans, vegetables, but it tasted like home, like health, like intention. She ate while scrolling through social media, watching her people document their own transformations. TikTok was full of Black folks showing their new lives. At Black Excellence Daily, videos showing a day in her life, remote work for a Black-owned company, yoga class at a Black wellness center, dinner at a Black-owned restaurant, shopping at Black-owned stores. Caption: I went the entire day without code switching once, without being the only Black person in any space, without explaining racism or defending my existence. I forgot what peace felt like. I'm never going back. At Building Generational Wealth, series showing how he and 5 friends bought a triplex together. We each put down $30K instead of $150K alone. We each own 16.67% of a $450,000 property instead of 100% of nothing. We're building wealth together. That's how we beat the system. At Black Joy Daily, videos of Black families at reunions, at parks, at beaches. No protest, no trauma, no pain, just joy. Pure, unapologetic joy. Black people laughing, dancing, living. The comments were full of people saying they'd forgotten Black people could just exist. Just be happy without it being revolutionary. At Sober Black Excellence, day 180 sober. I didn't realize how much I was drinking to cope with racism until I stopped experiencing racism daily. Moved to a Black neighborhood, worked for a Black company, socialized in Black spaces, haven't needed a drink in 6 months. Clarity is beautiful. Instagram was full of Black folks documenting their altar spaces, their spiritual practices, their ancestor work. Keisha saw altars similar to hers, photos of ancestors, candles, offerings. She saw people doing libations, burning sage, honoring those who came before. The return of African spirituality, the blending of Christianity with traditional practices, the acknowledgement that their ancestors were real and present and powerful. It had gone from fringe to mainstream. At Spiritual AF, photo of an elaborate altar. My grandmother would have called this witchcraft, but you know what? Our ancestors before slavery did this. This is our tradition. Christianity was the colonizer's religion. We're going back to our roots while keeping what serves us, and it feels right. At Ancestor Work, started doing daily libations 6 months ago, pouring water for the ancestors who came before, asking for their guidance. And y'all, my life has changed. Opportunities opening up, clarity coming through, protection all around me. The ancestors are real and they're active. Twitter was still the discourse headquarters, and tonight the conversation was about the shift in dating patterns. At Black Love Matters, can we talk about how Black folks are increasingly choosing to date and marry within the community? Not because of hate or exclusion, but because of intentional community building. Thread. The thread broke down the data. Black interracial dating, down 41% in 6 months. Black folks seeking Black partners, up 67%. Black couples buying homes together, up 52%. Black families adopting Black children, up 56%. It's not about hating anyone else. It's about loving ourselves, about building families that understand our specific experience, about creating generational wealth in our community, about not having to explain Blackness to our partners. I used to date interracially, nothing wrong with it, but I realized I was partly doing it because I'd internalized that white or other was more desirable. After the awakening, I started asking, who am I choosing and why? Now I'm intentionally choosing Black partners, not because others are less than, but because I want to build with my community. My mama was in an interracial marriage for 20 years. She said the microaggressions, the explaining, the cultural disconnection, it wore her down. She's dating a Black man now and said, I forgot what it felt like to not have to translate my existence. That hit me. The replies were mixed. Some people celebrating the choice, some calling it divisive, some hurt because they were in interracial relationships, some defending different choices. But the overall trend was clear. Black Americans were choosing themselves in love, in business, in friendship, in geography, in every possible way. Keisha thought about her own dating life. She'd always been open to dating anyone, but she'd noticed her own bias. She'd been more willing to overlook red flags in non-black men because she'd internalized that they were a catch. Meanwhile, black men had to be perfect to get her attention. She'd been unpacking that for months, working on that in therapy with the black therapist she'd found through the community network, and increasingly she found herself attracted to black men who were also doing the work, healing, building, focusing on community. Not because other men were inferior, but because she wanted to build with someone who understood her specific experience without explanation, who knew what it meant to be black in America without a tutorial, who could partner with her in building black generational wealth and raising black children who knew their worth. She wasn't dating anyone right now. Still healing, still focusing on herself. But when she was ready, she knew she'd choose differently than before. She'd finished dinner, cleaned her kitchen, and prepared for bed. Her nighttime routine was sticking, impacting her moods in so many good ways. She still used her shea butter, and her skin loved her for it. She wore her satin bonnet with pride instead of hiding it like she used to when she had non-black partners staying over. She read books by black authors. Tonight, it was Octavia Butler again. This time, it was her Parable of the Talents, about building community in the face of authoritarianism. The words felt prophetic, like Butler had seen this moment coming. Before sleep, she went to her altar. It had grown again. More photos, more candles, more items connecting her to her lineage. She'd found more ancestors in her research. Her great-great-great-grandfather who'd bought his family out of slavery. Her great-great-grandmother who'd been a midwife, delivering black babies in the rural South. Her great-grandfather who'd served in World War I and come home to lynching and Jim Crow, but survived anyway. Warriors, survivors, builders. She lit her candles, said her prayers. But she was conscious now of what she was and wasn't praying for. She didn't pray for the president, didn't pray for Congress, didn't pray for unity or healing in the general sense. She didn't pray for her enemies or for people who wished her harm. That was the old programming. The colonized Christianity that taught her to pray for those who persecuted her, to turn the other cheek, to love her enemies more than she loved herself. She'd read the Ethiopian Bible now, the one they didn't want her to see. She'd learned that turn the other cheek wasn't about accepting abuse. It was about choosing your battles, that loving your enemies didn't mean enabling their evil, that protecting your own community came first. It was indeed biblical. Now her prayers were different. She prayed for her family, for protection, for prosperity, for peace. She prayed for her community, for strength, for unity, for resources. She prayed for black people globally, for liberation, for justice, for joy. She prayed for her ancestors, thanking them for their sacrifices, asking them for their continued guidance. And she prayed for her enemies, that they would get exactly what they deserved, that the universe would deliver perfect justice, that they would reap what they'd sown. She didn't feel guilty about it. This was natural. This was right. Protect your own, let the universe handle the rest. Thank you, she whispered to the flickering candles, to the ancestors watching from their photos, to the presence she could feel all around her. Thank you for waking us up. Thank you for reminding us who we are. Thank you for showing us we have a choice. Outside her window, the night was quiet. Not the empty quiet of abandonment, but the peaceful quiet of a community at rest. She could hear the hum of life. people coming home from work, family sharing dinner, someone's music playing softly, laughter from the courtyard where neighbors gathered. Her neighborhood was alive, thriving, building, while elsewhere in the city, in the predominantly white neighborhoods, the opposite was happening. Services failing, infrastructure crumbling, communities fracturing. The contrast was stark and getting starker by the day. Keisha climbed into bed, knowing she would dream again tonight, knowing she would return to the dreamscape, that space between worlds where millions of her people gathered each night, where the ancestors waited with their guidance and power, where the revolution was being planned and executed in ways the physical world couldn't touch. She closed her eyes, her last thought before sleep. We're winning. Quietly, but we're winning. And somewhere in that space between waking and dreaming, she heard her grandmother's voice. That's right, baby. Keep building. We got the rest. Meanwhile, across town, Brad Mitchell couldn't sleep. He'd been having trouble for weeks now. Every time he closed his eyes, the dreams came. Nightmares, really. Vivid, terrible, impossible to forget. Last night, he dreamed about his great-great-grandfather, seeing him clear as day, standing in a crowd of white men, a black man hanging from a tree. His ancestor was laughing, cheering. In the dream, Brad felt everything the hanging man felt, the terror, the pain, the betrayal of dying for the crime of existing. He'd woken up screaming. The worst part? He'd Googled it, found the historical record. It had actually happened in his hometown in 1911. A black man named Thomas Williams lynched for allegedly looking at a white woman wrong. The newspaper archives even had his great-great-grandfather's name listed among the concerned citizens who handled the situation. How had he dreamed about something he didn't know? He tried to tell his wife about it, but she just said he was stressed, told him to take some Ambien. But the Ambien made it worse. The dreams became more vivid, more visceral, harder to shake off in the morning. He'd gone on Reddit anonymously to see if anyone else was experiencing this. The thread he'd found was full of people, all white, all having similar dreams. Dreams of ancestors doing terrible things. Dreams from the victims' perspectives. Dreams that felt like judgments, like accusations, like hauntings. Some people were being driven to research their family histories, only to find the dreams were historically accurate. Others were too scared to look. Brad was too scared to look any further. One lynching was enough. What else had his ancestors done? He'd started sleeping with the TV on, the lights on, anything to keep the darkness at bay. His wife thought he was losing his mind. Maybe he was. But he wasn't the only one. His co-workers at the insurance company looked exhausted. Dark circles under everyone's eyes. Jumpant shadows. Someone had mentioned nightmares in the break room, and half the office had gone quiet in that specific way that meant everyone was having them, but no one wanted to talk about it. The black people in the office, the few who remained, seemed fine, well rested, calm. If anything, they seemed peaceful, content, like they were in on a joke everyone else didn't get. Most of them had left anyway. The office used to be 30% black. Now it was maybe 5%, and work had become a nightmare even during the day. Everything took longer. Systems were breaking down. The institutional knowledge was gone. Brad worked in claims processing. It used to take 3 to 5 days to process a claim. Now it took 3 to 4 weeks. The black employees who'd known all the shortcuts, who kept the system running smoothly, who trained everyone else, they were gone. And no one knew how to do their jobs without them. His manager had tried to call some of them back, offering bonuses. They'd all said no, politely but firmly, No. Where were they working now? How were they surviving? The questions haunted him almost as much as the dreams. He looked at his phone. 2:47 a.m. Another sleepless night. He scrolled through Twitter, anything to avoid closing his eyes again. His feed was full of people angry about the Great Withdrawal, angry that Black people weren't doing their part, angry that services were failing, that neighborhoods were declining. Everything was falling apart. But mixed in were other posts, scared posts. People talking about dreams, about feeling watched, seeing things in their peripheral vision. Ancestors showing up in reflections, guilt they could not shake. Someone had even started a hashtag. Hashtag TheHaunting. Brad clicked on it. Thousands of posts. White people all reporting similar experiences. Dreams of racial violence, visions of historical atrocities, feelings of being judged by forces beyond their understanding. Some people were waking up, actually changing, apologizing, doing better, making amends. But most were doubling down, insisting they had nothing to feel guilty about. They weren't responsible for their ancestors' actions, that this was all mass hysteria or a coordinated psychological attack or something. Brad didn't know what to believe, but he did know he couldn't sleep, knew he was scared, knew that something fundamental had shifted in the universe and he was on the wrong side of it. He got up, turned on another lamp, and settled in for another long night of avoiding sleep. Outside his window, in the darkness, he could swear he saw faces, watching, waiting, judging. He closed the blinds and turned on another light. It didn't help. Keisha stopped praying for her enemies and started praying only for her people. She stopped pouring her energy into a system that hates her. Is that selfish or is that self-preservation? What would happen if you only invested your energy where it was valued? If this episode resonated with you, like and subscribe. Comment with what surprised you most. Was it the sobriety stats, the cooperative economics, the Black Cowboys? I want to hear from you. Next up, episode 5, called The Ripples. Things are about to get real. The economic data is undeniable. Cities are falling, and the president is about to make some very bad decisions.